Come, little one. You get into the bed of your masters.
Josephine transformed from a socialite into the focal point of every banquet. After becoming the first consul, Napoleon sent a peace offer to Britain, but they never responded. When he summoned the British ambassador, the ambassador claimed to know nothing about it.
Are you aware of my letter of peace to your king?
I am not.
Shall I repeat it?
No, you may not.
Take this as a warning to your king. I will keep you guessing and scared. You will watch your borders and your back, and your manners are bound sooner or later to be French. I will offer no more letters of peace, and I will take the lack of a swift reply as an act of disrespect. You think you're so great because you have boats!
The European alliance ignored Napoleon, viewing him merely as an unknown figure from Corsica. The foreign minister, Charles, suggested that Napoleon resign as first consul of France in exchange for the title of consul for life.
I suggest that you abandon your role as first consul of France in exchange for the title victorious consul, by another name, king.
Napoleon felt a surge of joy. He longed for true kingship. On December 2, 1804, Napoleon held his coronation ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, declaring himself emperor and transforming the republic into an empire.
I found the crown of France in the gutter. I picked it up with the tip of my sword and cleaned it and placed it atop my own head.
Disregarding the opposition from across the nation, he crowned Josephine, who was 6 years older and had 2 children, as empress. Napoleon even personally placed the crown symbolizing royalty on her head and performed the coronation ceremony for her. This scene became one of the classic images in French history. After declaring himself king, Napoleon's most urgent desire was for Josephine to bear him an heir. As a result, they would often argue loudly at the dinner table, leaving others feeling quite awkward. Yet, after his outbursts, Napoleon would apologize to his wife that same evening. On December 2, 1805, on the anniversary of Napoleon's coronation, the Battle of Austerlitz began. This battle is famously known as the Battle of the Three Emperors, with his opponents being Tsar Alexander and Austria's Emperor Francis. Napoleon remained confident, believing that this war would bring yet another victory. When the enemy retreated to a frozen lake, the French artillery opened fire on the unsuspecting Russian forces. Napoleon, a military genius, achieved a great victory against overwhelming odds. He routed Tsar Alexander's army, forcing Emperor Francis to negotiate with Napoleon and reach a ceasefire agreement. Austria withdrew from the coalition against France, and Emperor Francis also renounced his title as Holy Roman Emperor. The Third Coalition against France thus dissolved, and the history of the Holy Roman Empire came to an end, making Napoleon the undisputed ruler of Europe. However, his romantic life began to encounter problems. Empress Josephine was never able to conceive, which greatly worried Napoleon's mother. She secretly sought out a young and beautiful girl, hoping to have her bear Napoleon's child. Ultimately, this woman did indeed become pregnant with Napoleon's offspring. Napoleon's mother urged him to divorce Josephine, and although Napoleon was typically decisive in battle, he hesitated when it came to love because he loved Josephine dearly. However, in the end, his quest for power triumphed over his love. Napoleon and Josephine ended their years of marriage.
You have embellished my life for 15 years, the memories of which will remain forever etched in my heart. This is for your country. That's what this is, right? You say it.
Our marriage has become an obstacle for the prosperity of France. Agreeing to the dissolution of our marriage, as I must, does not change my feelings.
Even after the divorce, Napoleon frequently visited Josephine, but their love could never return to what it once was. In July 1807, France and Russia formed an alliance, and Napoleon formally proposed to Francis, the King of Austria, expressing his desire to marry the king's eldest daughter, Archduchess Marie-Louise. But in his eyes, Marie-Louise was nothing more than a bargaining chip in political transactions and a tool for reproduction. Even after they had a child together, Napoleon would still bring the baby to see Josephine because all his love remained with her. However, this calm period did not last long, as Tsar Alexander soon tore up the alliance and colluded with Britain. In June 1812, Napoleon led a coalition army of 600,000 into Russia. On September 7, 1812, at the Battle of Borodino, Napoleon achieved victory with only 28,000 casualties and got closer to Moscow. Yet, when he arrived in Moscow, he found the city completely deserted. Sitting on the throne in the Kremlin, he felt no joy in his conquest. That night, the Russian army set fire to the city, preferring to destroy their own rather than negotiate with Napoleon. Infuriated, Napoleon planned to send troops to St. Petersburg, convinced that the enemy would not destroy their own country again. However, his subordinates advised him to retreat to Poland and wait for winter to pass. The harsh Russian winter was approaching, and the army's horses could not withstand such conditions. Though Napoleon was reluctant, he eventually had to withdraw from Moscow and retreat south. Along the way, the soldiers suffered from hunger and cold, and the Russian army continued to harass and counterattack. When they finally returned to Paris, there were less than 40,000 soldiers left. The once mighty Napoleon had suffered defeat. As punishment, he was forced to abdicate and was exiled to an island, though he retained the title of emperor. Napoleon spent his days on Elba in misery, while the Tsar surprisingly sought out Josephine. When Napoleon saw the news in the papers, he was furious. After 300 days of hiding on the island, refusing to accept defeat, Napoleon escaped. On March 1, 1815, he returned to France with 700 soldiers. By this time, the First French Empire had long ceased to exist, and Louis XVIII of the Bourbon dynasty had become a puppet emperor. The Imperial Guard, accompanied by the 5th Regiment, went to apprehend Napoleon, but unexpectedly, they were swayed by him and instead joined Napoleon's side.
Soldiers of the 5th Regiment, do you recognize me? Do you recognize me, soldiers?
Yes, Emperor!
I miss you. I'm melancholy for my home and for our victories together. I want to come home. Will you join me?
Long live the Emperor!
Upon his return, Napoleon headed straight to Josephine's residence, only to learn that she had passed away due to illness. He was heartbroken, having lost the love of his life. To make matters worse, bad news followed. Countries across Europe reformed the anti-French coalition, amassing an army of nearly 700,000. On June 18, 1815, the Battle of Waterloo erupted. This time, Napoleon lost his good luck. The Battle of Waterloo sounded the death knell of Napoleon's 100 days' reign. He was defeated by the coalition forces again, and this time he was completely defeated. Napoleon was exiled again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the central Atlantic to prevent any future escapes. Once a great monarch, he was now reduced to a prisoner, his former glory lost forever. 6 years after his exile to St. Helena, on May 5, 1821, Napoleon passed away. His last words before he died were Josephine's name. The phrase "every soldier carries a marshal's baton in his pack" is attributed to Napoleon. He is undoubtedly one of the greatest military leaders in French history. His military brilliance, political acumen, and leadership charisma have made him a legendary figure. In the 2 centuries following his death, studies about him have never ceased, and even today, his allure remains undiminished.